What's up, Rockstars? Today I'm going to be telling you about the Teburu system and how it can improve board games, really board gaming in general. Alright, this isn't necessarily a top 10 list, it's not in order, but there is a variety of things. Some I've talked about, some I have not, that I want to tell you guys about when it comes to the Teburu system. Now, if you didn't know what the Teburu system is, there's currently a GameFound campaign for a Vampire the Masquerade's game using the Teburu system. The Teburu system is essentially an electronic board with electronic dice that is in app-driven and kind of they can talk to each other. So there's a whole SDK you can pipe into, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. But essentially, it knows where your miniatures are, where you're at, and it knows how you're rolling, and it can incorporate that into its app-driven kind of gameplay. So with that out of the way, let's list some pros that can come out of that. Now, there are cons, like with all things, there are pros and cons. The cons will be in a separate video. Stay tuned for that. Subscribe if you have not. Thank you so much. Now, first of all, big one for me, no rule book, better onboarding. Now, what I mean by that is that's not necessarily how you have to do it, but you might as well. Once you have an app-driven game, and once you have a game that even knows where you're moving and stuff like that, it means it can auto-progress. So much like video games can have tutorials where you just play the game, and as you play it, you learn it. You can do the same thing with the Teburu system. So the days of sitting there for an hour reading this technical document, this technical manual about how to play and kind of manually do all these intricate mechanical systems, you can simply start playing with your friends, and you guys can go from like the moment it hits the board, you're now playing the game, and you guys can learn. You can get updates. You can search the rulebook. You can figure out what that is. In their previous game, the Bad Karmas, there was this little information, little eye that anytime you're looking at a card or a keyword or anything like that, you can click that, boom, takes you to exactly, it pops it up, says, hey, that's what this is. So you're never confused. Imagine what Trespass Odyssey and how easy it would be to play if it had an app. Now, again, pros and cons, but that is something that does help when it is well crafted. It automates a lot of that mundane stuff, but it also makes it to where there's not that upfront like difficulty of reading through this manual and having to leaf through it later on, and maybe wanting somebody else to do it and then explaining it. I mean, how many game sessions have you had where you all start like this as somebody explains the rules to you? No more. Again, it solves all of that. So that's actually a huge pro that I think is one of the things with holding most people back. I recently talked to a coworker that says, oh no, I'm not really into board games, because I was trying to get him into board games, right? And so I asked, well, what about it? He's like, look, if you have to spend more than 5 minutes explaining the rules to me, that just sounds like work. And I can't blame him, because it is work. It's work to actually tell everybody about it and read all about it, make sure you know what you're talking about, all that. Rule books are probably one of the biggest nope points of any board game. So getting rid of that, huge. Better for physically disabled people, better accessibility. Whether it comes to better color retention or bigger text, or being able to actually automate a lot of the fine mechanical stuff that you're having to do in board games. If you have a issue with your hands, with your eyes, anything like that, board games can often be difficult to get into because you can't change the physical components. If the text on the card is low, the text on the card is small, and there's nothing you can do about it. If the contrast is bad, the contrast is bad. If you have to fiddle with tiny little tokens or tiny little cards or shuffle them, you have to do that. And if you have a physical disability of any kind, whether it's just simple old age or an accident or you're born with it, or for any reason, or even if you don't want to mess with it, or it just helps to see things better, making things more digital helps with that, because you can change all of that. And that's actually really cool. So I think that's a huge thing that really prevents a whole group of people from ever getting into many board games that would normally love to, just because of the necessity to physically manipulate components. The next one is streamlining gameplay. So I talked a little bit about fiddly components. An example of this would be Darkest Dungeon, which was a video game that made it into a board game. And what a lot of people had issue with was the damage over time, or dots. So you can get bleed, and you can get poisoned, and you can get cursed, and you can do all these things, right? But you can get multiple instances of it. So maybe I'm bleeding for 1 point of health every turn, and I also have a 2 bleed of health every turn, and one lasts 3 rounds and one lasts 5 rounds. And in the video game, it just works. It just goes through, and you're able to have that kind of complex stacking dot system. In the board game, you actually have to stack tokens somewhere and then make sure you don't knock them over and then remember to take them off each time. And for every bleed one, you have to have all that and you have to fish through all the tokens to get it. You have to make sure you get a 1 HP one, not a 2 HP one, and you have to do all that. Stuff like that can be done physically, often pretty well, but it's kind of fiddly, right? We use the word fiddly and almost every review we ever talk about pretty much every board game is how fiddly is it? How often do I have to shuffle these cards? Is it every time I want a deck that looks through my deck and gets specific cards. That's super cool. But every time I do that, I have to shuffle every single time. And so then I have to spend another $100 to sleeve it all because I'm shuffling it all. And it just adds time. So normally I'm shuffling while other people are doing their cards and I can't pay attention because I'm busy doing this and making sure I get it right. And then I put my deck down and then it's my turn again. I have to look through it and then shuffle again. Automatic shuffling, all that kind of stuff can be automated. So all those fiddly parts that are people's often least favorite part of playing a board game, you no longer have to do. Only the good parts, the making decision, the rolling dice, the moving your minis, the other mechanics that you can do with card manipulation and stuff like that. All that you can actually do in the Teburu system so much easier. But it's not completely digital too, like a tabletop simulator. So it's not awkward either. You only do what makes sense and what you can actually do. Otherwise, provide the physical components for it and you can do that also. So kind of the best of both worlds in that sense. Now, another one that's huge is vastly improved AI. Coming from video games, right, where I've done all sorts of Dark Souls, boss battlers, all sorts of stuff like that, advanced FPSs, legendary Halo campaigns, all this kind of stuff where the AI is flanking me and going through and using teamwork and waiting until I reload and knowing I'm reloading my weapon to then charge and attack me, to the dynamic system all the way back from like Left 4 Dead where it crafted the actual game based off of dull moments and then dangerous moments. So everything's finally calm and you're going, and then suddenly a big horde of zombies are coming. And there's actually an AI that's determining the flow of the game to be able to do that and make it exciting the whole way through. That's custom every single time. Stuff like that has been video games only because it is next to impossible. Again, technically nothing's impossible. If you want to get a lot of math, you want to get your calculator out and some grid paper, you can figure out loot tables, you can figure out all this stuff. And board game creators have gone pretty crafty in simulating a lot of that, but AI is something that they simply have not. We think it's amazing to call it a focused AI-driven boss battler if the enemy even reacts to you attacking. The fact that there is a reaction card, and that's like amazing. Oh, I hit it, and then it hit me back. Oh my gosh, that's so amazing. Is so simplistic, so laughably calm and mild compared to what real AI can do when it comes to how smart it can be and how it can interact with what you're doing at the same time, that it's night and day. Board games don't really have AI. We have decision trees that are maybe 4 long, where it's like, if near a person that needs healing, heal. Otherwise, if in range of this, do that. It's just a bunch of if else, and it's just so funny. Not only is it kind of cumbersome to be able to do that, and then know, okay, this unit versus this unit and all that, but it takes a lot of time to do, and it's not that great. It's not that advanced. It's AI baby mode. Once you do it digital, that computer can start going to town. And again, if it knows your cards, if it knows what you're doing, where you're at, how you're rolling, what your health is, and all that kind of stuff, it can actually track that. So the AI in combat can be amazing. So much better than any other board game AI you have ever experienced. But on top of that, AI can do a lot more than just combat. This kind of almost goes to Vampire the Masquerade, right? I think of it kind of like the old video games for The Walking Dead, where you would like be talking to somebody, interacting with them, and you'd see in this little corner, that person's going to remember that, whether it was good or bad. Oh, you didn't help that person? That person's going to remember that. And all that was a trigger is, hey, you just made a decision, and that will affect the future of how this character reacts to you, and they'll just react custom to how you're making decisions. Now, we do that now in board games with choice matrix, where you have like 100 different checkboxes, and you have to, A4 is that, and you do all that, and you write down little notes and stuff like that. But even that doesn't get to the whole point, because let's say you made a decision to not help that person, right? And so what board games typically do, the farthest they go is, okay, then they will react this way. Kind of a Boolean, did you not? But when you get AI and it knows everything, well, maybe it didn't help them, but you're also really low in health and you come right after a battle, and it happens to be that they're not busy on their quest right now, so they happen to be there because it's doing all these calculations on a timeline and what's done and what you have right now. And so they'll actually still help you because you're hurt. But if you were fine afterwards, then they're going to brush you off. Stuff like that, the minutia of everything, of every game mechanic kind of coming together to create a more believable character reaction, that is possible through AI, whereas it's not before. I know I spent a lot of time with that, but it's something I hadn't really covered in depth like that yet. And coming from the video game side, there's so much potential to have a board game experience like you have never had before once AI gets involved. Okay, another pro, free support. That's right. Errata, you don't have to buy. You get sick and tired of that 1.6, that 1.5, that 1.8, that 2.0, all that kind of stuff, the 2.1, this card needs to change a little bit, so now I have to wait for the Kickstarter to launch, to then pay $35 for it, to then have it shipped to me, to then finally play it a year later. None of that ever has to happen again. They can update it there. Even if your physical component hasn't been changed yet, right? And maybe you want to, maybe you don't. Like you actually have a physical token that shows the wrong character or whatever. They can, in the app, change what that registers as or how that is. Or maybe the balance isn't super great for that weapon and they can change the die rolls and stuff like that. They can do all that kind of stuff for free over the internet. You don't have to put more stuff on your shelf. You don't have to buy more stuff. It just happens and it happens quicker. You don't have to wait for it either. There's a lot of benefit to the support of that when it comes to fixes, erratas, changes, updates, clarifications, all that beamed to you. You don't have to worry about it. And then, of course, there's content, too. A lot of companies love to support their products. You made this cool game and you want more of it. Well, they can do it for you, both free and non-free versions. You can actually add more to your game continually and get that support long term. So there's less and less one and done type games. And now it's more of an investment into, I love this game and I keep getting more stuff for it. And they don't have to necessarily ship stuff to you. And even if they do, it's smaller because it's also less wasteful for the environment. I'm not big on really hounding down board games as the culprit for environmental impact. However, I do buy a lot of plastic. And so being able to just make these games smaller. When I covered the Vampire the Masquerade game, I talked about how you get these minis, you get this one board, you get these little tokens, and that's really it. No more having to throw away old versions. No more shipping the French and English version of the same one and throwing away all of one language you don't even need, but it makes logistical sense with the physical thing to just ship it all. No more wasted cardboard space. No more any of that kind of stuff. It's all just digital. It costs whatever electricity produces when it comes to the environment. Now, this one's huge for me. Quicker setup and teardown time. One of the issues, like I just said, is there's often a lot of different components and organization and stuff like that. So either you're doing that beforehand or game night starts with 30 minutes of setup and then explanation and then tear down afterwards and people, winter cleans up and all that other kind of nonsense. Instead, you get the Teburu system out, you get your game board, the few components that you need that are actually kind of fun to interact with and do, and then you do that and you're up and playing. Again, you don't need to do the rule book, you don't need any of that kind of stuff. You can set up and tear down quickly. You can swap games even easier. If multiple games support the Teburu system and you're swapping between the two, you already have much of what you need already there. So then you just get the new components out. You put your other components that don't take up a lot of space up and you are good to go. That's it. That's all you need. Super cool. And like I said, it's smaller too, less storage. This wall of games behind me is ridiculous. There's more over there. This stuff takes up so much space. And every game, how many times have people complained that when you buy multiple expansions of Zombicide, you get like 27 different player boards that are these big plastic player boards? Because one might be, this one allows new people to come in. This one allows new people to come in. This one allows new people to come in. And this expansion standalone, all this stuff. So you end up with 800 million dice because you only need one, but each one came with dice. Each one came with a rule book. Each one came with this. You double up on all this stuff and you need all these different things. All the thousands of cards that you need, literally thousands of cards in some of these games are gone. You don't need all that. You don't need stacks of them. You don't need to then go get all the sleeves to sleeve all the cards, which then adds to cost, adds to bulk space. And it's just this mammoth, undertaking to be able to store all of these physical components. It's a lot less now. It's less to ship, it's less to store, it's less on the environment, it's less to set up, all of that streamlined. Now, this is a fun one. Mods and prototypes. So the Teburu system specifically has an SDK that you can use. So if you want to do some custom thing on your game, you actually can. And then you can publish it and let other people do it. If you want to be able to get a prototype out, if they have, like, let's say you were like, hey, using your Vampire the Masquerade that you already have, let's say you're a content creator or whatever, like, I have this rule set that I've now uploaded to the system. So it has this little app thing or whatever, and it'll determine the roles or whatever. You can start playing my game with those components, or you want to reuse those components or change them or do a fan, campaign through stuff like that. They actually are supporting and advertising. So super cool that you can be able to do that. And anytime, if you don't know what mods do to a game, they can bring so much longevity to it and improvement for it. Now, there are some cons around, like, how controlling an app is, but mods can help that. It doesn't mean every person is able to do that, because you have to know how to be able to use an SDK. But for those that can, they can definitely really help other people by producing that. And I think that's super cool. Now, there's 2 more points here. Of course, one of the big things is just immersion. It can be more immersive. You know what's not immersive? Is having me read your campaign story to other people. I don't pronounce things well. I get a sore throat. I'm already getting one just from this video alone. Like, it's not as good as some professional voice actor doing it. And of course, I might play some music on it, but I can't customize the music nearly as well, or have reactions, or make critical hits super cool. One of the things people were talking about with Darkest Dungeon was how great it would have been to have it to where when you score a critical hit or they score one, you get the narrator's voice. If you know what Darkest Dungeon is, a video game, you know the narrator's voice. He's fantastic, and it adds so much to the game. Oh, a critical hit, and like you can actually feel that. The game can do that. It can be immersive to what you're doing physically and what you're doing digitally, and combine it all into an experience that is much more immersive than otherwise. When characters have different voices, instead of me just saying everybody's voice the same, because I'm not going to be doing a voice, or maybe you do and everybody gets a British voice and somebody gets a Scottish voice and it's all stereotypical and terrible. Like, you can do that, but professional voice acting, music scores, reactions live to what you're rolling and selecting and doing in the game is just, you can't beat it. That kind of automation and immersion is only possible through something like this. Lastly, I have a little bit of a challenge for you, but I fully believe that there is such a thing. Now, again, technically, if you want to do enough math and you want to do enough physical components, there are, and tracking and minutia and stuff, you want to spend 20 minutes making a decision. Anything's technically possible, when it comes to like physical components, but not very practical. So what unique, brand new, never really before seen gameplay mechanics can the Teburu system do? Now, I'm no game designer, but there are game designers out here, and I'm sure they're thinking, what could I do that's fully driven with an app? If I know what they're rolling and I know where they are and what they're doing and where their health is, and I know all this stuff about them, what could I do digitally that then can combine with that? The one thing I think of a little bit is there was a game a while back on Kickstarter that had an inertia system. So your ships would kind of constantly be gliding through space. And it was kind of difficult to do, and there's stuff like that. Or even like photosynthesis with like the sun going around and stuff like that. Like, there's these kind of systems we've done like that. But I was thinking, like, what if a racing game actually had like inertia and weight and stuff to it, to where it knew the vehicle you were at, it knew how fast you were moving, and it knew all this, so it knew kind of how much you need to brake and stuff like that. And could you do that? And then I think, okay, what about dexterity games, and how could dexterity games work with this? And I'm sure there are ways, not just enhanced AI, but whole new mechanics that are really only possible through the combination of physical and digital. Obviously, you can do anything digital, but for board games specifically, what new mechanic could this enable? Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are, if it's even possible. I would love to hear them, that's for sure. And I think others would as well. Guys, thank you so much for hearing out some of the really definite pros that the Teburu system has. And again, I'll link to the Vampire the Masquerade down below as well. Feel free to check that out. And guys, thank you so much. Again, subscribe for many more talking point videos, new videos, reviews, unboxings, all that coming up real soon. Guys, have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Bye, guys.